Your fiqh is very strong. How do you recommend one practices their knowledge and facts of fiqh to keep it strong in their memory? I don't know if my fiqh is so strong. It's not. It's actually not one of my favorite subjects. My favorite subject is hadith, but fiqh, it's important to know as an imam. And the reason that it's easy for me to practice is because people are constantly asking me questions. The best way for any science, not just fiqh, if I want to be well versed in that science, I have to keep involving myself in that science, and I have to keep researching. I have to keep looking back at those questions. I have to keep looking back at issues. I have to ask questions myself, right? So if just because someone comes with me with a question, it's not even necessary that I'll specifically go and look for an answer to that question. Sometimes I'll look into other things that are related to that, or I'll have my additional questions myself. So if an individual wants to stay sharp in a subject, they have to keep studying that subject. They have to keep reading about it. They have to keep looking into it. Having a circle of friends who are interested in that particular field, making sure that we stay in contact with them. And I mean, we live in a time and we live in an era, alhamdulillah, where it's very easy to make a WhatsApp group or to make a Telegram group, to have a space for discussion. The other thing that I think is very important, make sure that we surround ourselves with people who are going to challenge us, right? I don't, it's very important that when I present ideas or I present issues, that I do make mistakes, right? Like we, alhamdulillah, like we all make mistakes, but it's important to understand that I know that when I make a mistake, I'll have two or three people come up to me after after the Q&A or after the khutbah, and they're like, Sheikh, you said such and such, but it's actually not like that. Or in the madhab, there's this type of khilaf. So it keeps me sharp too, right? It keeps me sharp too. So surrounding ourselves with people who are willing to challenge us, keep reading, keep researching, asking our own questions. These are all good ways to stay versed in a particular field, in a particular science, in this case, in fiqh. Is Allah on His throne above the heavens? So this is a question of jihah, and it has to do with the question of direction. There is a difference of opinion on how to deal with these questions. When we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's that, when He talk about His essence and we talk about His self, the question about where is Allah, this is a very common question from some of our brothers. They like using it to test, where your aqidah is, unfortunately. But the reality is if somebody says Allah is up, it's not necessarily a wrong answer. But the question then comes, all right, well, if somebody's standing on the North Pole and then you have another person standing on the South Pole, which direction is up? Right? Is there a general idea of ulu? Yes. There's a general idea of ulu and like being above and being fawq, like which is completely understandable and it's completely reasonable. But if you try to assign a specific direction, saying that Allah is north or Allah is south or Allah is east, right? It's ridiculous. It's silly because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be encompassed. Allah is greater than anything we think about Him. Allah is larger than anything we think about Him. So assigning a particular direction, this is where some of the scholars had a problem. This is why they had an issue. And this is why this question wasn't necessarily addressed. Because the moment you start addressing direction and how, it's almost like you're trying to contain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above being contained. And we know that He is beyond our capacity to comprehend, He's beyond our capacity to limit, and that's why you will have a difference on how to answer this question and how to deal with it. Is it true wearing a wrapped up shawl in prayer is not allowed? No. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prohibited I forgot, I think it's like andibat. Like, so basically what he prohibited is that an individual wrap themselves completely like this, so that they're like this, right? So if you take a wrapper and you completely wrap yourself, the problem is that you become constricted and it's difficult for you to raise your hands, it's difficult for you to go into ruku'. This is what he sallallahu alayhi wasallam said not to do, but not because you can't wear a wrapped shawl. No, that's not the case. An individual can wrap a shawl. The only time that he can't is when it becomes restrictive or when it becomes tight. Also, the other type of garment that he sallallahu alayhi wasallam restricted is that if you wrap and if you sit down and it becomes apparent, right? So if you can see, because like underwear is not, it's a new concept, right? It's not like they had like underwear back in the day. So if an individual just has one open wrap, what's going to happen if he sits down or if he sits in a certain way? His awrah will become exposed, and this is what he sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited. What's a hadith that really strikes hope and love for Allah in the heart? So all of these type of a hadith, they're called raqa'iq, heart softeners, and these are hadith that can be found in different books. Going back to one that most of us are probably familiar with, the Riyadh al-Salihin. So if an individual really wants to see and find the hope in the statements of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is one of the books to go back to. Or even going back to Bukhari or Muslim, there's Kitab al-Raqa'iq, right? The heart softeners. And it is meant to show our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A great hadith on this is the hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that whoever takes my friend, who takes my wali as an enemy, then I have taken him as an enemy. And then He Azza wa Jal, He goes on to say, well, how do you become this wali? So it's somebody who makes their prayers, somebody who does their nawafil, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from His awliya. Can you guys make a playlist of all the class streams? I learned from home, so this would help a lot. Khalas, I will put in the request for you, inshallah. Is boycotting a choice, generally speaking, and is boycotting Israel and companies that support Israel a choice? Yes, it is. I know that some people, they try to put a lot of spiritual pressure on others into boycotting. Do I think it's better to? Yes, right. That's my personal belief. I think it is better to boycott those companies that that support Israel, the Israeli government, directly or indirectly. But at the end of the day, my family and myself takes priority. Right. I am. My priority is to take care of myself. My priority is to take care of my family. And if I'm going out and there's certain products that I'm purchasing, or if there's a certain store, for example, there's one store that's near me and there's another store that's 20 minutes away, it is completely reasonable for me to take advantage of my convenience. Why? Because I'm trying to save my time, I'm trying to save my family's time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Is it better? Is it, like I said, is it better, to take that extra time? Sure, it is, but there's always going to be better options, right? There's always going to be better options, and there's no limit on the better things that we can do. There's no limit on the better things that we can do, but my first priority is to myself, and my first priority is to my family. So if it conflicts with my personal convenience, then I have a choice. I definitely do have a choice. I can never tell someone that it is haram or it is an obligation to do this or an obligation to do that. Those things are very clear. What is an obligation? An obligation is praying. An obligation is fasting. Impermissibilities, lying, stealing, taking advantage of others. These things are very clear. But when it comes to issues like this, there is ultimately a choice. Is there a better choice? Absolutely. I definitely do agree with that 100%. And sometimes there's a less better choice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to make good choices for ourselves and our families. Ameen.